The wind in Chicago cut through skin like a serrated knife, but Arthur didn't feel the cold anymore. He only felt the leash trembling in his hand. "Shut that mud up or I'll put it down myself!" The voice boomed from the scaffolding above, dripping with malice. It belonged to a construction foreman, a man whose face was as hard as the concrete he poured. But Arthur, a 60-year-old veteran whose life had been reduced to a backpack and a shopping cart, didn't move. He couldn't. His dog, a scruffy, three-legged terrier mix named Buster, had planted his feet. The dog was vibrating with intensity, his nose pressed against a pristine, freshly dried concrete retaining wall. For 72 hours, the dog hadn't eaten, he hadn't slept, he hadn't even urinated. He just stood there, letting out a rhythmic, desperate bark that echoed off the luxury high-rises surrounding them. Passersby spat on Arthur. Residents threw water from balconies. The police were on their way to drag them both to jail. Everyone thought the dog had gone rabid. Everyone thought Arthur was just another crazy homeless man losing his mind. They were wrong. What Buster heard behind 12 inches of steel-reinforced concrete wasn't a rat. It wasn't a pipe. It was a sound that would tear the city apart and reveal a secret so dark, the police officers who eventually broke down that wall would drop to their knees in prayer. This is the story of the day the world stopped to listen. Arthur sat on a discarded cardboard box, his joints aching with the damp stiffness that comes from sleeping on pavement. He adjusted the tattered army jacket that hung loosely on his frame. It was the only thing he had left from his old life. That and the dog. Buster wasn't a purebred. He looked like a spare parts dog, ears too big, fur like wire wool, and a missing back leg from a car accident years ago. But to Arthur, he was a soldier. "Easy, Corporal," Arthur whispered, his breath clouding in the freezing air. He poured a little water from a plastic bottle into a cracked bowl. "You gotta drink, buddy. Please." Buster ignored the water. He was in alert mode. His ears were swiveled forward, his body rigid. He was staring at the gray wall of the new Riverview Luxury Apartments complex, specifically a section of the perimeter wall that boarded up an old service alleyway. 2 days ago, this had just been a wooden fence. Then, the construction crew had come in with the cement mixers. They worked fast, pouring the foundation and the wall in a single afternoon to seal off the unsightly alley before the grand opening. They had sealed something in. It started the moment the wet cement was poured. Buster had dragged Arthur across the street, whining and pawing at the wet sludge. The workers had kicked at them, laughing. "Get that rat away from the wet cement. It'll ruin the finish," one worker had yelled. Arthur had apologized, pulling Buster away, but Buster didn't stop. As the cement dried, turning from dark gray to a pale, stony white, Buster's anxiety spiked. Now, on the morning of the third day, the situation was critical. Buster's paws were bloody. He had scratched at the base of the wall until his nails had cracked, leaving frantic red streaks on the bottom of the concrete. "He's not stopping, is he?" Arthur looked up. It was Mrs. Gable from the bakery down the street. She was one of the few people who looked at Arthur and saw a human being. She held out a paper bag. "I brought a stale croissant for you, and a sausage for Buster." Arthur took the bag with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mum. God bless you." He tore off a piece of the sausage, the savory smell wafting through the cold air. Any other day, Buster would have done a backflip for this. Today, the dog didn't even turn his head. "Buster," Arthur pleaded, holding the meat under the dog's nose. "Look, sausage, your favorite." Buster pushed the hand away with his snout and let out a sharp, piercing bark at the wall. "Woof, woof." Pause. "Woof." Mrs. Gable frowned. "That's odd. He's barking in a pattern." Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He had been a combat engineer. He knew about patterns. "He's not barking at the wall, Mom. He's talking to it." The sun climbed higher, bringing no warmth. Only a harsh glare that reflected off the glass towers of the city. The noise was becoming a problem. Buster's bark was monophonic, repetitive, and incredibly annoying to the wealthy residents living on the lower floors of the adjacent building. At 10 a.m., the back door of the luxury building flew open. A woman in a silk bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee that probably cost more than Arthur's monthly food budget, stormed out onto the sidewalk.
"Excuse me," she shrieked. "Hey, you, the bum!"
Arthur flinched. He stood up slowly, removing his beanie. "Yes, ma'am?"
"You need to leave, now. That animal has been barking for 3 days straight. I have a migraine and my husband is on a conference call. If you don't move, I'm calling the cops."
I can't move him, ma'am," Arthur said, his voice raspy. "He won't go. He thinks there's something wrong with the wall." The woman laughed, a cruel, sharp sound.
"The wall? It's a wall! It's concrete! What is he, a structural engineer? He's a stray mutt with brain damage, and you're a trespasser."
She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen aggressively.
"I'm calling 911, and I'm calling the building manager."
Arthur looked at Buster. The dog hadn't flinched at the woman's yelling. He was completely locked in. Arthur knelt beside the dog, pressing his own ear against the cold, rough surface of the concrete. He closed his eyes. He listened past the traffic noise, past the wind, past the woman's screaming. Scritch, scritch. It was faint. So faint he thought he imagined it. It sounded like a mouse scratching. Or a fingernail? "I hear it," Arthur whispered, his eyes widening.
"You hear what? The voices in your head?"
Arthur spun around to see a massive man in a high-visibility vest approaching. It was Miller, the site foreman, the man who had ordered the pour. He looked angry and slightly nervous. "I told you yesterday to beat it," Miller growled, stepping into Arthur's personal space. Miller smelled of tobacco and stale sweat. "You're scaring the tenants." "There's something inside," Arthur said, standing his ground. "My dog hears it. I just heard scratching." Miller's face twitched. "Inside the wall? It's solid concrete, you moron. There's no cavity. We filled the whole alleyway. Now grab your rat and walk, or I'll throw you in the dumpster myself." Miller reached for Buster's leash. That was a mistake. Buster, who had been entirely focused on the wall, whipped his head around. He didn't bite, but he let out a snarl so primal, so filled with wolf-like warning, that the 250-pound foreman jumped back 3 feet.
"It's rabid!"
the woman in the silk robe screamed.
"Oh my God, it almost bit him!"
Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Arthur's heart sank. He knew how this ended. The police would come. They would see a rich woman, a working foreman, and a homeless man with a growling dog. They wouldn't listen. They never listened. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt at the curb. The lights flashed blue and red against the gray morning. Out of the first car stepped Officer Crane. Arthur knew Crane. Crane was the type of cop who saw the homeless not as people to be protected, but as stains to be removed. He walked with a swagger, his hand already resting near his baton. Out of the second car came a younger officer, a woman Arthur hadn't seen before. Her name tag read Davis. She looked different, softer eyes, but alert. "All right, show's over," Crane shouted. "Miller, what's the problem?" "Assault," Miller lied instantly, pointing a thick finger at Arthur. "I asked him to move along per the noise ordinance. He sicked his dog on me, nearly took my hand off." "He's lying," Arthur shouted, stepping in front of Buster. "I didn't sick him on anyone. Miller tried to grab him." "And you?" Crane turned to the woman in the robe. "Ma'am?" "It's been barking for days," she said, clutching her pearls dramatically. "It's clearly dangerous. And look at the man. He's obviously high on something." Crane nodded, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Okay. Arthur, turn around, hands behind your back. Animal control is on the way for the dog. If it's aggressive, they'll put it down." "No!" The scream tore out of Arthur's throat. "You can't take him. He's a service dog. He saved my life. Please, just listen." Crane grabbed Arthur's shoulder, spinning him around roughly. Arthur winced as his old war injury flared up in his shoulder. "Officer, wait." The voice was quiet, but firm. Officer Davis had walked past the argument. She wasn't looking at Arthur. She wasn't looking at the foreman. She was looking at the dog. Buster had returned to the wall, but now he wasn't barking. He was whining. a high-pitched crying sound that broke the heart. He was scratching the concrete so hard that one of his claws had torn completely off, leaving a smear of bright red blood on the gray wall.
"Look at the dog, Crane,"
Davis said. "I don't care about the dog, Davis. I care about the assault," Crane snapped.
"Dogs don't do that,"
Davis said, walking closer to the wall.
"They don't hurt themselves like that for no reason. He's desperate."
Officer Davis knelt down. She ignored the filth on the sidewalk. She put her face inches from Buster's snout.
"What is it, boy? What is it?"
Buster licked her face once, frantically, then looked back at the wall and barked. Once, pause. Twice. Davis looked up at Arthur, who was currently pinned against the squad car by Crane.
"Sir, you said you heard something?"
"Scratching," Arthur gasped. "And, I think, tapping." Miller, the foreman, stepped forward, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cold. "Officer, don't listen to him. It's an echo. This is a construction zone. Pipes settle. Buildings shift. We need to clear this area." Officer Davis narrowed her eyes. She looked at Miller. She saw the sweat. She saw the way his eyes darted to the section of the wall Buster was obsessed with.
"Crane, let him go,"
Davis ordered.
"Excuse me?"
Crane scoffed.
"I said let him go, and give me your baton."
"Davis, you're a rookie. Don't tell me what to do. Give me the baton," Davis screamed, her voice cracking with sudden authority. Stunned, Crane released Arthur. Davis grabbed the heavy steel baton. She walked up to the wall. She turned to the crowd, the foreman, the rich woman, the few pedestrians who had stopped to watch. "Everybody be quiet. Absolute silence. If anyone makes a sound, I arrest them for obstruction of justice." The street fell silent. Even the traffic seemed to lull. Davis raised the baton and struck the concrete wall. Clang! She waited. Silence. Miller smirked. "See? Nothing." Davis struck it again, harder. Clang! Clang! "Is anybody in there?" she shouted, pressing her ear to the stone. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. Arthur held his breath, praying. Buster stood frozen, his tail pointing straight back. Then, from the other side of the foot-thick concrete, came a sound. It wasn't scratching this time. It was a voice, muffled, distant, weak. "Mommy." Officer Davis jumped back, as if the wall had burned her. Her face went pale white. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. She grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I need fire and rescue at 404 Riverview immediately. Possible entrapment. Expedite, now." "Entrapment?" Crane asked, confused. "In the wall?" "There is a child behind that wall," Davis yelled, unholstering her gun and pointing it at Miller. "Hands on your head! Now! Get down on the ground!" "I didn't know," Miller stammered, his hands shaking as he dropped to his knees. "We just poured the concrete. I didn't check the storm drain, I swear." Arthur didn't wait for the fire department. He ran to Miller's truck, which was parked nearby. He saw a sledgehammer in the truck bed. He grabbed it. The heavy tool felt familiar in his hands. He had built bridges and destroyed bunkers in the war. He knew concrete. "Arthur, wait for fire!" Crane yelled. "She doesn't have time," Arthur roared. He swung the sledgehammer with a strength that shouldn't have belonged to a malnourished 60-year-old man. Crack! The impact sent a shockwave up his arms, but a spiderweb fracture appeared on the surface. Buster barked encouragingly, dancing around Arthur's feet. Crack! Dust flew. A chunk of concrete the size of a fist fell off. Officer Crane, realizing the gravity of the situation, holstered his weapon and ran to the truck. He grabbed a pickaxe. "Move over!" Side by side, the homeless man and the cop who had tried to arrest him attacked the wall. They swung in rhythm. Smash, smash, smash. Sweat poured down Arthur's face. His muscles burned. His heart hammered against his ribs. Don't stop. Don't stop.
Sirens grew louder, converging from every direction. The fire truck arrived, and burly men with heavy hydraulic drills jumped out. "Step back," the fire chief ordered. They engaged the heavy machinery. The sound was deafening. The drill bit chewed through the concrete, turning the gray stone into powder. Suddenly, the drill punched through into empty space. The engine whined. "We're through!" the firefighter yelled. He pulled the drill back. A dark, gaping hole about the size of a dinner plate appeared. A rush of foul, stagnant air blasted out, the smell of old sewage and damp earth. "Camera probe!" the chief yelled. They snaked a fiber optic camera into the hole. A screen on the side of the drill lit up. The crowd gathered around, holding their breath. The image was grainy and dark. Then, the camera light hit something. A sneaker. Pink, with sparkles. Then, a leg. And then, a face. It was a young girl, maybe 7 years old. She was curled in a fetal position in the old storm drain tunnel that the wall had sealed off. She was shivering violently, her lips blue. It was Emily Rose, the girl who had vanished from the park 3 days ago. The Amber Alert had been on every phone in the state. She had crawled into the old drain pipe to hide during a game of hide-and-seek, gotten lost, and ended up at the sealed end. While she was down there, Miller's crew had poured the concrete over the exit, unknowingly sealing her in a tomb. "She's alive, but barely," the chief yelled. "Widen the hole. Go! Go!" It took another 10 agonizing minutes to break the wall enough for a person to fit through. A firefighter crawled in, dragging a harness. Arthur stood back, leaning on the sledgehammer, his chest heaving. Buster sat at his feet, no longer barking. The dog was trembling, but he looked calm. He looked proud. When the firefighter emerged carrying the limp body of the little girl, a silence fell over the street that was heavier than the concrete. The paramedics swarmed. They put an oxygen mask on her tiny face. They wrapped her in thermal blankets. As they lifted the stretcher, the girl's eyes fluttered open. She looked around, confused, terrified. Then she saw Buster. The scruffy dog hobbled forward, disregarding the paramedics. He put his snout against the girl's dangling hand and licked it. The girl's fingers twitched. She weakly grabbed the dog's fur. A faint smile touched her lips. "Doggy?" she whispered. The crowd, which had grown to hundreds of people, erupted into applause. People were crying. The woman in the silk robe was sobbing into her hands, looking at Arthur with pure shame. Officer Crane walked over to Arthur. The arrogance was gone. He looked shaken. He looked at the handcuffs still hanging from his belt, then looked at Arthur. Crane started, his voice thick. "I was going to take him to the pound. I was going to arrest you." Arthur stroked Buster's head. "He's a good soldier, officer. He doesn't leave a man behind." Crane took off his hat. He extended a hand. "I'm sorry, Arthur. I am so sorry." Arthur shook the officer's hand. "Just don't ignore the next one. All right?" The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Foreman Miller was arrested on the spot for gross negligence and several safety code violations. The investigation revealed he had skipped the mandatory inspection of the alleyway to save time and get a bonus for early completion. He would face years in prison. Emily Rose was rushed to the hospital. She had severe dehydration and hypothermia, but the doctors said she would make a full recovery. If she had been in there for even 6 more hours, the lack of oxygen and the cold would have killed her. But the real story, the one that went viral across the nation, was about the homeless man and his dog. A local news crew had filmed the entire rescue. The footage of Arthur swinging the sledgehammer alongside the police officer and Buster licking the girl's hand was played on every news channel from New York to Tokyo. 3 days later, Arthur was sitting in his usual spot, though now, instead of cardboard, he was sitting on a pile of blankets people had donated. A black limousine pulled up. Out stepped a man in a sharp suit. It was the mayor, Emily Rose's father. The mayor didn't wave to the cameras. He walked straight to Arthur
and knelt down on the dirty sidewalk. He had tears in his eyes. "You saved my baby," the mayor choked out. "Buster saved her," Arthur corrected gently. "I just held the leash." The mayor looked at the three-legged dog, who was happily chewing on a premium bone someone had dropped off. "I can never repay you," the mayor said, "but I'm going to try." He handed Arthur a thick envelope and a set of keys. "What is this?" Arthur asked. "The envelope is the reward money for finding Emily. It's $50,000. But the keys—" The mayor smiled. "There's a guest house on my property. It's small, but it's warm. And it has a massive fenced-in yard. It's yours. Rent-free. For as long as you want." Arthur looked at the keys. He looked at the street where he had frozen for 5 years. He looked at Buster. "Does the yard have squirrels?" Arthur asked. "Buster likes chasing squirrels." The mayor laughed, wiping a tear away. "Thousands of them." Arthur stood up. He clipped the leash onto Buster's collar, but this time the leash wasn't a restraint. It was a connection between two heroes. "Come on, Corporal," Arthur said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "We're going home." As they walked toward the limousine, the construction crew was already there, tearing down the rest of the wall. The concrete lay in rubble, but the legend of the dog who wouldn't stop barking would stand forever. Arthur looked back one last time at the spot where the wall had been. He realized that sometimes the hardest walls to break aren't made of concrete. They are made of indifference, and it took a three-legged dog to break them all down.